about legacy. Legacy is a sort of like wherein a person wants to remember somebody. It's a legacy that you have. And this morning you have talked about Solomon. You have discussed about Solomon. He was the wisest man. We have known him. We remember him. He has built an empire. He has, in fact, all the benefits of a kingdom which is not at war. At the same time, he was given the ability to handle things in capacity. Despite of that, he failed in some issues that he has faced. So that's his legacy. Each of us have or are developing our own legacies, wherein people will remember what we have done. People will be reminded of what things we have done. Since our birth, we have developed that legacy. Before I proceed, let me congratulate the new grandfather this morning. I'm sure they're very happy at this point in time. I've seen the picture. The baby is so cute. Sabi ng iba, mistizo raw, no? So let's allow us to congratulate the pastor for the new baby. So legacy is sort of like a thing that he remembers about you, about the person that you are. In the Bible, we have a lot of people who have legacies which we can remember. Let's try to see some of them. And they're not so prominent as you would tell them. They're just very simple people. But they are remembered. They have their legacies. Okay, we have three of the people that we will study. Turn with me your Bibles to Daniel 3. And let's start with verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought this man before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set? One of the issues with regards to temptation is the coercion that you will have from another person. Or maybe you like another person, the self is there. And this is what is being done by Nebuchadnezzar to the three people that we're studying this morning. What he's saying is, do not ye serve, he's the king, do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up. It's like a coercion. It's like a relationship. It's working on yourself. Now, if ye be ready that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God shall deliver you out of my hand? See the temptations that have been mentioned here. If you will study it, you have the cornet, the flute, the harp, the sackbut, the psaltery, dulcimer. These are musical things. We are sometimes or oftentimes tempted by musical things. Different type of music which we hear all about. Psaltery, poems. These are temptations that we should watch whenever we face things. This has been used by Nebuchadnezzar to tempt these three people. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king. So this is the response. O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. So this is one action that we can do when we are tempted. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. When we are tempted by different people, forced in terms of self, in terms of relationship, in terms of music, then we say God will deliver us from all these temptations. Verse 19 to 20. Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury. Again, the temptation is there. The power is there, being forced on this tree. Full of fury, and the expression in his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times. So this is again part of the temptation. I will give you harder times. I will try to coerce you financially. I will remove you from your work. These are part of the temptation that we will face. Heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were, what did they do? They even bound them, right? In their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's command was urgent, and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. With that alone, you could have changed your mind in terms of the temptation. The king could have seen that, but he still insisted on doing what he wants. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. They what? They fell down. Imagine yourself being tied from your turban from head to the feet, and then being thrown to the fiery furnace. And of course, you will fall down to the fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." "Look," he answered, "I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of Man." When we are tempted, we have somebody with us. The Son of Man is always there, trying to guide us, trying to help us. In fact, during the times of trouble, that's the time when He's closer to us, when Christ is closer to us. Then Nebuchadnezzar went into the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire, and the satraps, administrators, governor, and the king's counselor gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servant who trusted in him, and they have prostrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, once we have overcome temptation, once we have seen the beauty of going through the problems that we have to face, then we will have the reward in the long run, that we have fought a good fight. Therefore, I make a decree, this is the king's decree, that any people, nation, or language that speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ass heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. What a legacy this tree had. What a legacy they handed down to us. Even right now, we're talking about them. This is an example of a legacy that has God in the center of things. So, as Sister Amy has mentioned this morning, when faced with temptation, we should be careful. We should watch out. We should be able to handle it. When faced with the furnished, with music, with temptation, choose God when faced with a furnace. Just say, God will deliver us from all these things. Care when facing temptation, sound of the cornet, flute, harps, all those music you can hear, all the good things you can see, all the coercions you can see, your temptations, you have to watch out. Discover God while in the furnace. While undergoing temptation, you will see God with you. You will discover the steps that He is trying to help you during those periods. God will show up in the furnace, in the temptation that you see. Legacy is built while you are in the furnace. You will be remembered for the things that you have overcome and the problems you have encountered in terms of all of the temptations that you have faced. Let's see another person who have sort of separated himself from the rest. While the others of your friends have been attacking Jesus, have been trying to find ways to at least put him into death or put him into a wrong spot, this guy has distinguished himself and have given us a legacy which we can remember. There will be your Bible to Mark 12, and let's look at verse 28. And one of the scribes came, and having heard them reasoning together, and perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, which is the first commandment of all? So this scribe came. Of course, he has his friends practically looking at him as he asked Jesus. And Jesus answered him, the first of all, the commandment is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. This is the answer that we should give to people who have been trying to tempt us in terms of the presence of the Lord. The Lord our God is one Lord. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. There is none other commandment greater than this. So this scribe, this sort of like one of the top leaders during his time, was trying to ask Jesus for something. And instead of trying to find out bad things about Jesus, he sort of want to know more about Jesus. And the scribe said unto him, well, Master, thou hast said the truth, for there is one God, and there is none other but He. And to love Him with all the heart, and with all understanding, with all the soul, and with all the strength, and to love his neighbor as himself is more than all whole burnt offerings and sacrifices. Let's look at that again. Verse 33. And to love Him with all the heart, and with all the understanding, and with all the soul, and with all the strength, To love his neighbor as himself is more than all who burnt offerings and sacrifices. And when Jesus saw that he answered discreetly, he said unto him, Thou art not far from the kingdom of heaven. You are close to the kingdom of heaven, as Jesus have said, as compared to the other Pharisees and scribes. And no man after that durst ask him any question. That scribe has given us a legacy, trying to learn from Jesus, trying to study, instead of going with the flow, instead of going with his friends. He has asked Jesus things. Love God with all your heart, love thy neighbor as thyself. Since we are talking about legacy, how many of you have children here? Okay, majority of us have children. Do you know that you and your partner or your spouse have given something to your children already, even though you don't know them? Okay? You have given your DNA to your children. So, when you see your children, it's half of the characteristics from the father, half of the characteristic from the mother. So it's a legacy that you have handed down. So you have given them a gift. Whether these are good gifts or bad gifts, but you have already given your children your heredity. It's in their DNA. Not present, it's very common to do DNA for paternity tests, in terms of crimes that we have right now, also in terms of medical treatment. Right now, they could, with just a test of blood, they could at least analyze already if you have a starting tumor or a cancer in your body. Just analyzing the blood through the DNA in your blood. You could already say in the initial stages, once they analyze the DNA from your blood, that you have a starting cancer. Also, with regards to babies, they already could predict with simply testing the blood from the mother and baby's side. But even if the baby is still inside the womb of the mother, they could test already if they have any defects that they may have in the future. So with DNA, with this DNA studies, you could now predict a lot of things. Previously, in the 1900s or so, DNA was disregarded as nothing. They say it's a lot of crap in terms of studies. But right now, it's one of the best in terms of diagnostic and treatment in terms of medical. The law of heredity. The physical and mental condition of the parents is perpetuated in their offsprings. This is a matter that is not only duly considered. Wherever the habits of the parents are contrary to physical law, the injury done to themselves will be repeated in the future generation. So you are already transmitting some of your characteristics, and it's up to your children to control them and see how they will face them. The power of heredity. Consider the power of heredity, the influence of evil associations and surroundings, the power of wrong habits. Can we wonder that under such influences, many become degraded? Can we wonder that they should be slow to respond to efforts for their uplifting? So, as has been mentioned this morning, without God we can't do anything. We need God in our ways, because we have some characteristics which have been transmitted to us by our parents, and this has to be controlled, and we need God to control this. There was a story of an husband and a wife. Their name are Jonathan and Sarah Edwards. Jonathan Edward felt God called to become a minister. He and his young bride began a pastorate in a small congregation. During those years, the pastor, Jonathan, wrote many sermons, prayers, and books, and was influential in beginning the Great Awakening. Together, they produced 11 children who grew into adulthood. Sarah was a partner in her husband's ministry, and he sought her advice regarding sermons and church matters. They spent time talking about these things together, and when the children were old enough, the parents included them in their discussion. Let's look at the legacy of these two, and you will wonder, and you will simply admire how this husband and wife worked together. From their descendants came 100 lawyers, came from their family, and a dean of a law school came from their descendants. 80 holders of public office, 66 physicians, and a dean of a medical school. These are Sarah and Jonathan Edwards. 65 professors of colleges and universities. 30 judges. 13 college presidents. 3 mayors of large cities. 3 governors of states. 3 United States senators. 1 controller of the United States Treasury, and 1 vice president of the United States. With God's guidance, legacy can be developed to a higher level. What kind of legacy will you and I have? What things can people remember about you and me? What kind of legacy will you leave? Will it be lasting? Will it be imperishable and eternal? Or will you leave behind only tangible items like buildings, money, and or possessions? Everyone leaves a legacy, for good, bad, or even indifferent. We all leave footprints behind us. We will be remembered for our generosity or selfishness. Those who will talk about us will see the ways we love them or the ways we neglected them. There's only one way to leave a Christ-like legacy, to leave footprints that will last. You cannot do this on your own. You cannot find life in loving God and loving your neighbor, because that is the law. Receive Christ's offer of mercy. Let Him fill you with His Spirit, and then watch as He empowers and teaches you how to love Him and others. All of us, in one way or the other, when we accepted Christ, will have problems, as has been mentioned also this morning. We will have temptations. We will have to face things. It's like these 3 people whom we have studied, just like this scribe whom we have studied. But with Christ on our side, with Christ helping us, especially during the hour of need, when we are so tempted, with Christ being in our furnish, then we'll be able to overcome.